Hey, welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the City of Trail Council held in the council committee room and for the chambers at 1394 Pine Avenue in Trail, BC, and via Zoom live meeting commencing at 3 o'clock for the committee of the whole meeting and immediately following, followed by a closed council meeting and reconvening at 6 o'clock for a regular council meeting. Meeting webinars are recorded and published on the city's YouTube site at trail.ca/YouTube. So we'll call the meeting to order. And before we do an adoption of the agenda, there is an addition in the agenda, and that is item 20E. And it is a request for Pacific Sport Columbia Basin for a letter of support for their application to Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program. So is there a motion to adopt the agenda with that addition? That was moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. That was carried. So we'll now move into the committee of the whole. Is there a motion to move into the committee of the whole, please? All those in favor? Thank you. That was carried. So we do have our departmental reports here today.
We're doing a delegation first.
Yes, sorry. Yes, sorry. We have a delegation today. And we have Ellen Nielsen from Nielsen Strategies on the Trail Warfield amalgamation in terms of reference.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to also introduce my colleague Sherry Hurst, who is here with us today on screen. We have been asked to provide a presentation to council and to have some discussion with council on some draft terms of reference that we have been hired by the City of Trail and the Village of Warfield to prepare on a potential amalgamation study for submission of the terms, that is, to the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs. So it's in that context that we're here, and for that reason that we're here today to make a presentation to council and then to participate as you see fit, Your Worship, in discussion with council on the materials that we'll present. So if it's all right, I will share screen with some slides and go through a bit of a presentation and then make ourselves available, of course, to participate in questions and answers and any discussion. Your Worship, we have been Sherry and I have been asked to put together some draft terms of reference for the municipalities to submit to the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs to conduct an amalgamation study. We're going to go through a little bit of a presentation. As I mentioned, we'll divide the presentation into the following pieces. A bit of background just to bring council up to speed, although I think council is already there with respect to how we got to where we are and where we're going. Study purpose, outline the purpose of an amalgamation study, 3 purposes, in fact. Look at the governance, or that is the study governance in particular. So how we would oversee and give guidance to the consultants undertaking the study. The 4th is the different elements or components that we would want to see included in an amalgamation study for the 2 municipalities. Community and First Nations engagement, very important part of the study. And in fact, one of the purposes of the study, as we'll see in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about that, the roles and responsibilities of the different parties involved in the study, including the municipal councils. And then finally, budget and timeline based on some discussions we've had with the ministry to date on those points. I will mention that we have shared our draft terms of reference with the ministry. We have received some feedback from staff in the department that's responsible for local government structure. And we did earlier today at 1 o'clock meet with your counterparts at the Village of Warfield. So we have had, given this presentation, had some discussion with the Village of Warfield Council as well. And I will mention just finally, just to emphasize a key point, is that Sherry and I have been hired specifically to write the draft terms of reference for presentation to the councils and ultimately for presentation as final terms of reference to the province for consideration for an amalgamation study. We have not been hired to actually conduct the amalgamation study. That decision comes a little bit later. Just by way of background, Your Worship, a couple of key points: the history of local governance in the Greater Trail subregion. I know Trail Council is very aware of some of the history, some key points from our perspective, For many decades, local governance and the division of Greater Trail into a number of different jurisdictions, including several municipalities, has been a topic of some discussion and some study. I personally have been involved as a consultant in the Greater Trail area since the mid 90s in various capacities at various points of time. All of those different engagements that I've had with different municipalities and with the province and with the regional district have in some way or another focused on, or at least tried to address different local governance issues and the potential for some kind of restructure of the broader area. Over those decades, and in fact, beyond earlier than that, I think as well, but over the recent decades, different jurisdictions have come together to look at different ways to restructure themselves. Nothing has come out of it although there have been a number of agreements around cost sharing for services and joint service provision, either directly or through the regional district. So there is a lot of that has been going on, but haven't yet come to the point where we've looked at amalgamating different local government jurisdictions. That has now changed, or is in the process of changing, and based in part on the Warfield Municipal Sustainability Study that we undertook. And Mayor Jones, I know you were present, as were some members of council, at some of the in community engagement exercises or efforts, open houses and so forth that Sherry and I held with the Village of Warfield. That municipal sustainability study we finished last year, the purpose of that study was to determine whether or not Warfield as an autonomous municipality was set up for a financially sustainable future. We determined based on that study, and we determined in consultation with the steering committee, that there were going to be ongoing challenges and that Warfield may benefit from looking at some kind of amalgamation. In practical terms, and that amalgamation meant looking at Trail as a potential partner for amalgamation. Council accepted that recommendation, as did the ministry, and council then approached, that is Warfield Council approached you and your council, Mayor, at Trail, to seek support for a study on amalgamation. That support was given. We are now dealing with the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs on this terms of reference for that study. The purpose of an amalgamation study is threefold. The first is to understand the impacts of amalgamation. And when we think about the impacts of amalgamation, what we're really seeing is amalgamation involves bringing together two jurisdictions to create one. In our case, it's the Village of Warfield and the City of Trail. What does that decision, or what would that decision to bring those jurisdictions together to create one, what would that decision mean in terms of, and mean for local taxpayers and local residents and businesses in terms of service provision, that is who provides and how they're provided the local government services, governance, how a single municipality would be governed and by whom, and third, finances. What would municipal finances look like in a unified, amalgamated municipality, and what would the property tax implications be for individual ratepayers? Those, understanding those, identifying and understanding those impacts, those implications of amalgamation, one of the key purposes of an amalgamation study. Another purpose then is to engage with residents and with the broader community to understand the issues, the concerns that residents may have, to answer questions, and to, in essence, really ensure that residents and electors in both jurisdictions have all the information that they need and all the understanding they need to make an informed decision on whether to amalgamate. Engagement is identified as a separate purpose because in British Columbia, as opposed to all other provinces in Canada, local governance is a local matter, is a local decision to be made. Our provincial government for the past 6 decades has followed a policy that has said local electors make decisions on how they wish to be governed. In other jurisdictions and other provinces, those decisions tend to be made for municipalities and local electors by the provinces. We've got a different approach here. And because we have that different approach, engaging citizens is very important in these studies. The third purpose, Your Worship, is to, based on the input or the feedback we receive from residents and electors in each of the jurisdictions, and based on the study that is undertaken and all of the impacts that are understood and the implications of amalgamation, the third purpose is then to determine whether there is sufficient rationale and support and interest in both communities to proceed with a referendum on amalgamation. The ultimate decision again on whether to amalgamate would be left to electors in each of the jurisdictions through a referendum. So that third purpose is then, do we go forward to
Can
referendum?
you just hold on a second? We seem to.
Yes.
Yeah, you might have to go back 40 seconds. I can't rewind it, but I don't know. We lost your volume for a bit. If you could please maybe carry on from last time you.
Of
ended that.
course. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Let me go back at the risk of repeating something. Let me go back and just talk a little bit about the purpose of the study. Three purposes. One is to understand the implications or the impacts of amalgamation, impacts as they relate to who provides services, how the jurisdiction is governed, and what the property taxes and finances would look like as a single municipality. The second is then to engage residents, recognizing that residents in British Columbia have the ultimate say over matters of local governance and how they wish to be constituted as a municipality. And third, then, is to determine based on our understanding through the study of the implications of amalgamation and based on the feedback we get from residents, whether there is support and interest to proceed to a referendum question on amalgamation. Study governance. These types of studies need to be led by a particular body. And again, going back to the importance in our system of electors, local electors having the final say over decisions of governance, each of the different options available for leading these studies involves to some degree electors or the people elected to represent them. The first option available to the municipalities is a joint council-led process. That would be a process involving the two municipal councils coming together, creating a de facto steering committee for the study and leading the study, and determining based on then the outcomes of the study what the recommendation should be with respect to a referendum. The second approach is to create a citizens assembly. This approach was taken in the two most recent amalgamation attempts or studies in British Columbia. One was the municipality of North Cowichan and the city of Duncan. That was done about 10 years ago. They created a citizens assembly to guide that study. Then more recently, we had an example in the city of Victoria, in the district of Saanich, which is still ongoing in the sense it has been recommended as a referendum question in the upcoming municipal elections, and that's going to occur in 2026. A citizens assembly is an autonomous body created for the purposes of looking at, in our case, amalgamation, or in other cases, a very impactful, large public policy governance question. So in our case, amalgamation, it would be, they would bring together equal numbers or numbers of representatives from or citizens from both jurisdictions, delegate to that body the authority to oversee the study and to determine whether amalgamation were the preferred option, and then make that recommendation to electors. The third option is to have a resident and council steering committee. This option would create a joint steering committee comprised of representatives of both councils and representatives of both sets of electors or residents from both municipalities. That body would work with consultants to undertake the study, would make recommendation at the end of that study to each council with respect to whether a referendum should be held. The councils would then make a subsequent question on the referendum to the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs. We recommend that the parties consider having that third option, that steering committee comprised of, we suggested 2 council members from each municipality. So for a total of 4 elected officials, 4 residents from each of the municipalities. So a total of 8, that would include 12 then. And that thought be given to 2 potential additions. One would be local First Nation representation. The other would be a local business, either Chamber of Commerce or Tech Resources individual to be on that committee as well. Those points are simply put forward for discussion purposes. There's pros and cons of those. The key recommendation here are the 2 council members and the 4 residents from each jurisdiction. We recommend the steering committee option as opposed to the citizens assembly and the other option, because the steering committee option is the most streamlined and most cost effective to put together in our view based on our experience. It allows for representation from both the elected officials and the electors, the citizens from each jurisdiction. It also provides for operating autonomy, if you will, from the jurisdictions, but not ultimate autonomy. And so the recommendations continue to flow back to and through the councils to make. So we have suggested that a steering committee be put together in place of one of the other options. Your worship, there are a number of different elements that would need to be included in an amalgamation study. And these elements come from, we identify from the work that we've done over many years on these types of studies, but also from discussions that we've had and guidance that has been provided by the ministry and ministry staff in particular in the past few weeks. So the study elements are as follows. The one is the current state. In all restructure studies, an amalgamation study is a form of a restructure study. In all restructure studies that contemplate changing the situation from what it is today to a different situation, we like to start off with a clear understanding of what it is today, the current state. So that would be a current state understanding of the two communities and their various characteristics, a look at how the municipalities are structured, how they're funded, how they're governed, all those kinds of things to get a very clear understanding of what we're starting with. We then would want to look at the amalgamation context. So what is an amalgamation study? How does it work? What are the assumptions that underlie it? And what are the principles going to be that drive this particular study? The amalgamation impacts I talked about earlier is being a key purpose, understanding the impacts that is being a key purpose of this study. So we would want to then have and this would probably be the largest part of the study itself. We would look at all of the different local government services that are provided to the two jurisdictions. We would bring those together under a scenario of amalgamation, and we would understand then how services are affected, how governance is affected, and importantly, how finances and property taxes are affected. So property tax impacts understandably are very important for different property owners, residential businesses, and others to understand in each of the jurisdictions. We would want to have a number of different scenarios and a number of different examples to profile as part of the study. Another key component of the study would have to deal with implementation. That is the period of time and the process through which the municipalities would go of a decision to amalgamate and then the creation or the establishment of the single municipality. Quite a few steps, as you can imagine, to go through in that process that would have to be mapped out very carefully as part of the study. Community and First Nations engagement. So community engagement, I've talked about at length already about why that's important. First Nations engagement, also important for the study to contemplate and to address, because the province is operating under a post-DRIPA environment here where decisions need to involve engagement with First Nations. The province is clear that in making a distinction between First Nations engagement as part of the engagement of the community through this kind of amalgamation study and First Nations consultation, kind of capital C consultation, which is the prerogative, but also the responsibility of the province to undertake. The province does the consultation with the First Nations, the engagement and the offer of information and the offer for outreach with the First Nations comes from the steering committee and the consultants as part of this study. Your worship, when we think of the engagement strategy, that engagement as a key component of the overall study, we would want to look to the consultants to work with the steering committee to create a robust engagement strategy. It's that engagement strategy and the degree to which citizens feel informed and able to make a decision that often will be the difference between an acceptance by the ministry to proceed to referendum versus a denial, and then also a positive outcome of amalgamation and a rejection of amalgamation. So when we think of an engagement strategy, we would look to the consultants to work with the committee to create a strategy that would include characteristics or opportunities such as a separate website for the study. Unique to the study is the main repository of information and the official information resource on the study. open houses in person in both communities, a number of open houses in person in both communities to share the findings of the study. We'd want to look to virtual meetings, recognizing that not everybody's in a position to come out to an open house. We would want to look at a number of different written materials, all of which would be included in digital form on the website, but also would be mailed in hard copy form to every household in Trail and every household in Warfield. We would look to social media, we'd look to radio and newspaper as mediums to impart messages, to communicate messages throughout the Trail subregion. We'd also want to we also look to the consultants in the steering committee to host small group discussions, to give everybody opportunities to ask questions where they were maybe not able to do so at larger open houses. And I talked already about First Nations outreach. That's something that would be undertaken in collaboration with the province, or at least on the advice of and with the guidance from the province on that. And then finally, we would look to the consultants in the steering committee to create opportunities for feedback to be given over the course of the study. And that would be through cute questions and answers, but also there'd be electronic and web-based and other forms of feedback, or the mechanisms for feedback. Roles and responsibilities are important to understand as well. We've got 5 different parties that are 5 different groups or agents, if you would, that would be party to this study. The first is the province. The province has a number of different roles to play. One is as a funder, or a joint funder at least. The province would put forward funds under municipal affairs to help fund this study. I will caution, however, and we made this point to Warfield Council, that it would be a tripartite funding relationship. The province would look to the municipalities both to make contributions to the study. The amount of contributions, the split, if you will, among the 3 parties would be a point for negotiation. The province would be a funder then, at least towards or for the study. The province would also outline the process to be followed, and that would be in league with, or that would follow the terms of reference that we're setting out for the province here and for your consideration. So the province would endorse that process. The province would then also oversee the process, because the province constitutionally is responsible for local government structure, and so it would need to oversee that process. And then finally, it would receive and ultimately accept the recommendation of the steering committee to either have a referendum or to not have a referendum. And if it were to have a referendum, the province then would be responsible for organizing that referendum. Municipalities, both municipalities would have important roles and responsibilities in the study. The first role for council would be to endorse the terms of reference, send those to the province, ultimately sign on for those, endorse the funding model once that were negotiated with the province, and then provide its share of that funding as per the model. The municipalities, each of the municipalities would also then be responsible for appointing members to the steering committee. So, and creating the steering committee as a special select committee of council under the community charter. So both municipalities would create the committee as a special, as a select committee, and appoint members to it. We suggest that appointment process for the public portion, at least the public members, be done through a advertised process, but ultimately that would be something for each council to consider. A key part of the municipalities in terms of roles and responsibilities would be municipal staff. So we would look to both jurisdictions to make 1 or 2 senior staff available to the consultants to be the liaison, as it were, with the individual municipalities to get the information needed for the technical analysis. That would be done. The joint municipal project team would meet fairly regularly with the consultants over the course of the study. It would also review some of the consultants' work and ensure accuracy and so forth. That gives a sense of the overall role and responsibilities of the municipalities. Another key role for council, I should mention, would be to receive the recommendation from the steering committee and then to make its own recommendation based on that recommendation to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. The steering committee, we've talked a little bit already how it would be put together. Its role would be to oversee the consultant's work, would be to spearhead and oversee the engagement of the communities and First Nations, and then ultimately to make a recommendation based on the findings and the feedback it gets from the communities to each council on whether to proceed to a referendum. And then finally, residents. Residents, their role is to ultimately vote in a referendum, but also to become informed, to be able to vote, to make an informed decision. So residents really, it's about engagement, it's about being there and understanding and reviewing the materials, and then ultimately making a decision through a referendum on those materials. And then finally, Your Worship, I'll just talk a little bit about budget and timeline. Budget and timeline is going to ultimately be a decision driven by or made by the province, but the province is looking for input from both municipalities on this point. We've had some discussion with the province on this point, and we've had some discussions with your CAOs, that is Trail CAO, Mr. McClure, and Mr. Berhudoff from Warfield. Ministry approval and funding are key then to thinking about the budget and timeline. So the ministry needs to approve it, needs to then determine how much it can fund and put towards the funding for that. So those are key considerations. An RFP for consultants, a request for proposal for consultants to undertake the study, would be part of the consideration around budget and timeline. Overall, with those points in there, we would expect 12 to 18 months, which would take us beyond the next election, and the province's preference is to go beyond the next election. When to start the study is assuming that budget approval and ministry approval came forward, would be a question for the ministry and the councils. We suspect that sooner rather than later would be the preferred option for all parties, but that's something on which we would like to hear feedback from council. We would look to the summer of 2027 as a completion date, or a realistic completion date for this type of study. The total cost we would anticipate to be between $150,000 and $200,000. That would be determined by the municipalities and the ministry, in particular the ministry on that, because they would need to endorse that study and provide their part of the funding on that. I will just remind council at this point that Sherry and I have not been hired to undertake that study. We're not looking at that as something of what it would cost us to do. We are simply saying what we believe consultants would require in order to do the study, in keeping with the terms of reference that we've put forward for consideration. Your Worship, I will end there. I'll stop the sharing of the slides. And again, we are very happy to participate in any discussion and to answer any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you, Alan. That was a lot of good information.
Yes.
That looks like a lot of work ahead of both councils, Warfield and Trail, if we do decide to go forward. I'm just going to ask council if they have any questions, and Councillor Benson has her hand up.
Hi, Alan.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. Hi. Just curious, the terms of reference document noted that infrastructure assessments are excluded from the scope of the study. And I'm just wondering if you could explain a little bit more on the why for that, and whether this could lead to an incomplete picture of the financial impacts for future service changes.
Thank you, and through the mayor to Councillor Benson, thanks for that question. Very important question, very important point. So when we do these types of studies, when consultants do these kinds of studies, they look to the different assessments, analyses, studies that have been done on different infrastructure systems, and they'll raise any flags that may be there. So in the case of Warfield Trail, one of the key considerations is going to be the trail water issue. There's been a lot of work undertaken on that, and so we feel confident, having done the municipal sustainability study, that there's good assessments, there's good materials on that already. That can be reported, that would be studied, all that kind of stuff. Whether the province or the parties, or if the province or if the parties felt it necessary to do a new assessment on that, engineers would need to be hired to look at the different options, to cost it to a comfortable degree, and so forth. That's not something that the consultants who undertake the amalgamation study would do, because they wouldn't be engineers, first of all, and it wouldn't be part of their scope. There are many precedents, and we see this particularly in incorporation studies, where we're moving from an unincorporated area to an incorporated area. There are lots of cases where there will be a need to do a separate analysis or assessment of the road condition, because when we go from an unincorporated area to an incorporated area, the responsibility for and the ownership of the roads transfers to the new municipality, and the new municipality, for understandable reasons, is reluctant to take on something that may be a situation with failing roads, and so there's typically an assessment done of those roads. I'm not sure we'd have the same need in this case, but if the need arose as a result of discussions through the amalgamation study for an assessment to be done, the steering committee at that point with the municipalities could go to the province and say, we've got a particularly important case that is going to be pivotal in helping electors understand whether to proceed or not. We need to have an assessment done on this. And in our cases, in past incorporation studies, at least, the province has funded that separately through engineers and so forth. So it wouldn't be part of our scope, but we wouldn't necessarily not look at that if the need arose.
Counselor Hanson.
Thank you to the chair. Hi, Alan. Hi, Sherry. Thanks so much. I definitely, thank you, Councilor Benson, for asking that question, because that was something that I, being in Warfield quite regularly, I understand kind of their infrastructure situations. I think having a full scope infrastructure, assessment done is really imperative for us, knowing what capital planning projects we're going to need to, or if this was to go forward, would need to be undertaken. So along with the water, and of course, how that would be structured and how that would be paid for, I think would be very important for us to look at. Also, a full detail of their asset management, from the halls to the pool to all of the things that are going to need to have upgrades done. Capital infrastructure money spent, I think, really is important to understand the full scope of the financial situation that Trail could potentially be undertaking in a, larger municipality with a bigger budget.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councillor Hanson. I appreciate that. And those expectations are not illegitimate by any stretch. Those are valid expectations. How the ministry receives them, we'll see. But I think that it's not unreasonable to put those into terms, or to put those forward as expectations. Thanks for that.
Anybody else? Councilor Benson has that.
Thank you. Through the chair. Thank you. Through the chair again to Alan. Can you comment a bit on what assumptions would typically be used for the property tax impact scenarios and how they'd be validated before sharing with residents?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the methodology that we tend to follow in this case. So we would look, given this, and I invite my colleague Sherry to chime in on this as well, but we would typically make a starting assumption. And I think in this case, given the size differential of Warfield to Trail, we would say Trail is going to be the municipality that, in essence, under an amalgamation, extends its boundary to take in Warfield. So Warfield would become, in essence, a neighborhood of a broader Trail. In that case, we want to look at look at all of the different costs of extending Trail services into Warfield. And in some cases, that would be taking over and amalgamating the services. In some cases, it would be an extension of the service where a service doesn't exist. We would look then at the assessment base in Warfield, and we would add that to the assessment base in Trail, and we would calculate then based on every service that would go through each service. So there'd probably be, and you see if in a number of in these types of studies, you'll see specific chapters that profile 40, 50 services. Every local government service that is provided to the two jurisdictions is considered separately as a service and then brought together in terms of costs and impacts. So once we went through every service and understood exactly how that service would change in terms of its delivery and its funding and its revenue, so its overall financing, we would then say, okay, what do we need to raise by way of property taxes, given all the other revenue sources we have and we count on, and not ones we wish to have, but ones we know are there. What would we need to raise through property taxes to pay the total service bill for the new amalgamated municipality? What does that then, given Trail's existing tax rates, what does that look like in terms of tax implications. Does that allow us to raise enough to pay the total bill? If it doesn't allow us to raise enough, then we have to look at adjusting the overall tax rates to get to that point. And we would use the tax multipliers that the trail has in place right now. So the assumption would really be to take Trail's existing financial approach and taxation approach and apply it to the broader amalgamated jurisdiction, determine whether that were going to be sufficient to, in terms of raising revenues to pay the overall bill. And if it wasn't, what adjustments we would need to make and what the overall implications would be for taxpayers. We'd also then want to be very careful to ensure that the implications for individual taxpayers were fair to both jurisdictions. So the key example here is there would be no expectation for trail taxpayers to fund any of the cost of addressing Warfield's water issue. That would be something that Warfield residents and Warfield ratepayers would be expected to fund entirely. That's understood in Warfield. I believe it's understood in Trail. That had the degree to which there's debt servicing coming out of that, and there would be, and there's then going to be implications either through rates or potentially taxes. That would need to be looked at as well. Then, so we may see slightly different tax bills at the end once we look at parcel taxes and all those kinds of things. But the overall municipal tax would be the same for both, and it would take into account all of the monies that needed to be raised to pay for the cost of services provided across the jurisdiction by the city of Trail. Sherry, is there anything there that we can add to that there, or perhaps make even clearer?
No, I think I'm subject to any questions that anyone else has, but that sums up how we did it. And I think the important point being that the ratepayers in Warfield would still be responsible for paying for their own water costs. So
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation there, Alan. I just had a question with funding from the government. In your experience with amalgamations, do you see them assisting with the pre-amalgamation process, but then also the post-amalgamation, which I think me and Colin have talked about with the grants that each municipality gets? Do you see commitments from the province to carry on with those grants, or do you lose one by losing Warfield?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Wilson. Good points. Very good questions. As an overarching statement, one of the things we look at when we do these kinds of studies, one of the things we do as part of these studies is to create a 7-year budget going forward. So that budget identifies all of the grants, all the unconditional grants that we would expect to come forward from the province. It also identifies all of the other revenue sources that we know about. We don't make guesses because this has to be something that's very certain for taxpayers to be able to vote on. So we look at all of that. We put together those budgets. So we would be looking to identify exactly what promises and what monies we could expect in an amalgamated jurisdiction from the province. But going back to your question, yes, the province would, as part of through a co-funding arrangement, fund a good portion of the amalgamation work to be done to get the study up to the point of referendum. The province would also then fund the process of actually undertaking the referenda, and because there have to be a referendum of both jurisdictions and both would have to pass in order for amalgamation to occur. Following that, historically, the province has, excuse me for 1 second. Historically, the province has provided funding to assist with transition. Whether that funding exists or to what degree exists anymore is going to be something for the province to advise on. We can tell what historically has happened. So often there has been monies put forward to allow for transition in the sense that there has to be, for example, an amalgamation or an extension, in this case of Trails OCP. There has to be all of those kinds of big policy documents and bylaws that need to get changed in the first few years post amalgamation. Historically, the province has assisted with that. On the infrastructure side of things, the province has not typically promised monies on those, but they have made available through grant programs monies through a competitive process to the new municipality, just as Trail gets those now and Warfield gets those now. There would be, you actually asked specifically, Councillor, about the grants that Trail gets versus Warfield right now. both get a small communities grant. Warfields is a little bit bigger because it's got fewer people, and so it kind of this inverse calculation. As if a Warfield population joining that of Trail would lose certain conditional grants, as a small community would be added to the Trail, whether it came out equal, we'd have to look as we did the analysis. So that's the best I can give. It's kind of, we would have to go through the analysis to determine what exactly the impacts would be.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, through the chair. And in regards to amalgamations that you've seen in past and the ones that are undertaken now, do you see, being that both the municipalities have the same unions, do you see staffing just as an addition to anything that is unionized, and then shuffling or redistribution of management staff, or what have you seen in the past?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hanson. Yes, it's important to remember in this context, Warfield has about 3 staff, so it's not a heavy number to worry about too much. I think they actually have 4 FTEs or thereabouts. So we would, a number of a couple of whom at least are contract, and so, but they do have some. We would expect that those staff members would simply join the City of Trail as employees. The non-unionized staff, that would be something to be negotiated between the municipalities based on the needs of the time. We have seen when we see these kinds of, and I will mention, just also by way of context, that there really are very few amalgamation studies in British Columbia, and there have been very few in the last 30 years. And in fact, even fewer successful amalgamations. I think the last amalgamation that occurred in British Columbia was Abbotsford and Matsqui back in '95. So it's not a type of restructure that we see happening a lot. We'll see what happens this October in the election, in the local government elections, because both the City of Victoria electors and the electors from the District of Sandwich will be voting on amalgamating those 2 jurisdictions. That will be very interesting because you got 2 very large jurisdictions that come together, and we'll see what happens there with the staffing. But in our case, with Trail and with Warfield, we would expect the small number of unionized staff to simply become City of Trail employees and join that bargaining unit. There would be some succession issues, there would be some labor relations issues to work through with the union, but we wouldn't expect anybody to lose their job as a result of that. We'd expect those to bring together.
Councillor Benson, you had another question?
Yeah, final question for me, thanks, through the chair. Just curious, and understanding that, well, number one, there have been very few amalgamation studies in the past, but the terms of reference document, it talks about the steering committee, and it's impartial and it's focused more on the process, not advocacy. And I'm just wondering in the past how this is managed, especially when presenting findings to the public. How do you ensure neutrality amongst the steering committee?
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Benson. That's an excellent question, and it really gives some, it shows some insight, I think, into some of the real challenges in managing the committee. It is, yes, we have had a number of instances, because these committees, I should mention, not just for amalgamation studies, but for any restructure studies. So Sherry and I are quite familiar in working and quite experienced in working with these types of committees for different incorporation studies and other kinds of governance studies. So to your point, it is almost inevitable that you are going to have a certain faction of each committee wishing to see a certain outcome and wanting to promote that. It becomes incumbent upon, or it is incumbent, and it can be challenging, but it's still incumbent upon both the chair of the committee and also the consultants to ensure that the committee is reminded repeatedly, and in some cases forcefully, that their job is not to be advocates for a particular outcome, but simply to provide the information in an unbiased way. That can be difficult still, especially if we have elected officials on the committee that have a preferred outcome. But it's something that we do manage very carefully. And in the past, we have actually had to involve the province as well, which has that oversight body, to come and speak to the committee in a few cases and say, look, we know you have, for good reasons perhaps, a particular outcome that you think is right for these jurisdictions. That's not your job. if you don't get to advocate that, if you continue to advocate, you're going to undermine this process. And if you undermine this process, we as the province are going to find it difficult to accept any recommendation coming from this committee. So the best thing you can do is either stop being an advocate, or if you're incapable of that, to step off the committee. And so we've faced those situations a bit. It's challenging, but it's really important to ensure and to manage very carefully the impartiality of that committee, because it does have implications for the purity, if you will, of the process, and for the province's willingness to accept the outcomes of the process.
Thank you. So, okay, just before we end, Ellen, I do have another question, or Sherry. I'm concerned about communication and engagement with both of the communities. When I was up there at the open house, I think you both saw it as well as I did, that there was different messages in the room. And it was kind of interesting to see, you know, what people didn't know and what they hadn't heard yet. And I just wonder, how do we make sure that everybody's getting the communication part? And not only that, but the same message at the same time. And it sort of does, you know, relate to what Councillor Benson, the question that she just asked. You know, making sure that everybody's getting the same information.
Thank you, Mayor. Really good question. I'll take a kick of this and then pass it over to Sherry. I think that from my perspective, we first of all ensure that the engagement process is robust enough that there are several opportunities for the committee, supported by the consultants, to provide the consistent messaging. And we do that while we can't do it always at the same time, in the sense, if we're in one community, we can't at the same time be in the other. We do it at least very close. So for one community one evening, the next evening we're in another. So we do those together to make sure that within the same 2-day period, everybody's got the same information. We also listen carefully and understand what we're hearing from the community and where there may be some inaccuracies and some myths that we need to address through FAQs. And we do that, and we get that information in front of people through the website, and also if we need to through newsletters and through other mechanisms. So we need to be very careful to make sure that nothing that shouldn't be given life is given life, and to address that early. We also emphasize from the outset that there is one source of official information on the amalgamation study and on the implications and on everything related, and that is the committee's website, the committee, and the committee's writing. So what the consultants put out on behalf of the committee is the sole source of official information, and that's what people should be turning to if they wish to get informed. We can't stop all of misinformation, because not all misinformation is innocent. Some of it's disinformation. And so we need to be aware of that, and we need to address that simply by continuing to give consistent messaging and the same message to both jurisdictions, using a variety of platforms as often as we need to. Sherry, how would you view it?
Yes, thank you, Alan. I think having that separate website that isn't the city's website, it's not the village's website, but then having both those municipalities point to the same information. So if you are on the City of Trails website and you want more information, it sends you to that same spot. And again, as Alan said, having that one official source has helped us in the past get the message out that there is one source of the definitive source for the information. And again, just as Alan pointed out, having information disseminated, you know, when we do have mail outs, they all go out to the same time to both jurisdictions, and not have one narrative in one area and one in the other. But again, trying to capture the feedback that we hear. And again, this may not be us, but that is heard in both communities, and answering those questions in the FAQs and other avenues like that. But you're right, it can be challenging, but I think through the engagement process and outlining that process, I think the committee will have the opportunity to oversee it.
Okay, great. I see no other questions. So I just want to thank you both for being here today and doing the presentation and sharing that information. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of information in there. And
Yes.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just mention, if I may, Your Worship, just in closing, that we will now confer with Mr. McClure and Mr. Perhudolph. We'll get together with the two of them, talk about what we've heard from this council, Your Worship, and also from Moorfield Council, and integrate some changes, some revisions in the materials, and then you'll get them back and have a chance to consider them again. And if you are supportive, to then put forward that recommendation for the study to the ministry.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll go on to our departmental reports. And before we get started, can I just thank you all for being here today? You know what? I always thank you and everybody's already left the room. So thank you for taking the time to be here today and talking about your departments. It's really important for us to hear this information. So first one up is the General Manager of Municipal Services, Jared Minor.
Thank you, Ward. Council, thanks for having me today. As alluded to earlier, I'll be providing updates for myself and 3 of the departments, so we'll go through them one at a time, and if there's any questions, obviously feel free to interject. So as I was reading this report today, I actually reminded myself that this is for pretty much the entirety of October, which turned out to be a fairly exciting month. And I know we've talked about it a couple of times, but the completion of the TMC. I know we've talked about how wonderful the home opener for the Smokies went, even though maybe we didn't enjoy the outcome of the actual game. I just wanted to highlight the efforts of all the staff that were able to make it look like it was second nature, reacting to a new environment, new boards, new radiuses. So hats off to the guys on the Zambonis that night, handled it flawlessly. So hands off to the crew there. We had a couple of things we had to take care of this month, one of them being the response to the vandalism down in Rotary Park regarding the gazebo. So again, a big shout out to the crew for being able to respond very quickly and addressing the structural damage that occurred and removing that safety risk. So that facility has been removed and cleaned up. Additionally, at the request of council, we were able to decommission the Rotary Park lookout. The crews took a little bit of time on this one to properly plan this job. You know, when you're going to demolish something, it takes a lot less planning than it does to decommission something. But they executed the removal of that overlook very well. It's currently in storage at Public Works. We do have a little bit of work to do to it to make sure that it is well preserved. Based on what we saw from the decommissioning process, and I know this was a question from our last discussion on it, it would take somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 days to be able to plan and execute the reinstallation of that, upon which you were able to give us that direction. A few other updates, and probably hear some repetition here. We're well into our seasonal transition. So the fall cleanup, almost halfway through, I think the end of next week is our final dates. A lot of transition to winter, including preparation for our winter snow plowing. We've also been able to wrap up a couple of projects in preparation for winter, including our new pipe racks, which we had on site and are being installed currently. So that allows us to get a lot of our materials off the ground and able to be found during the winter time if we do get the amount of snow that everybody is warning us about. It looks like Rock pictures, awesome. In terms of some projects, a couple of projects for myself, one of them being somewhat topical with the discussion we just had related to the amalgamation study. I'm coordinating with the village of Warfield on the water study. So we are looking through it and evaluating some contractors and consultants to help support that evaluation. I've been going through the previous study information, and we're looking at some potential gaps and where that needs to be touched up. Additionally was the request for the video conferencing update for council chambers. So Happy to say that we do have in hand a proposal from one proponent. Was hoping to have more than one, but we at least have one at this point. For an update of equipment that would bring us in line with many of the rest of our neighboring communities. Currently, I'm asking them to prepare a presentation for council so that we can take a look at what that looks like. We've tried to set a criteria that is lasting in terms of its installation, but not necessarily overly complex or I don't wanna say flashy, but you know, it needs to serve the purpose. It doesn't need to be anything too crazy. So hopefully we'll be able to coordinate a time so that they can show you what that looks like. And then in the meantime, we're working on how we would be able to install all of this new infrastructure and maybe some slight upgrades to council chambers in terms of layout. And in that vein, we're currently reviewing the hazardous materials report that we had done for City Hall to make sure we understand what the constraints there may be in terms of how to handle that interconnection. And just as a note, one of the requests was to handle this committee room and council chambers with a similar treatment, such that we could understand what, if we were to proceed with upgrades in this room as well, to make them operate similarly, to make it easier for all of our staff that have to handle our meetings for us. So in terms of community engagement, I did have a resident reach out over this last few weeks with some concerns over a couple of our monuments. Some of them along Rosalind Avenue and then one in Gerald Park. We have been able to go over the two monuments in question and we've put it into our plan to address some of the potential refurbishments that we were able to do. Some of the other items were simple, like benches that need to be replaced and stuff, so appreciate when residents do reach out and give us their concerns, and now we're able to put a plan in place to address them. Looking ahead, I am very excited, although somewhat nervous, to announce that we are counting down for the reopening of our aquatic center. Yes, so as it stands, the key material we've been waiting for our failed equipment is on its way to us. What that means is that crews are currently preparing a plan for the final installation and restart of the pool. And it is putting us into the week of November 10th for a restart. So I know as soon as I say a number, that's likely a thing that everybody's gonna remember. So in lieu of the fact that November 11th is a stat, likely that means that the pool should be available sometime between the 12th and the 14th. Additionally, with all of our programming and activities, we have reached out to our patrons, and all of those are being rescheduled to start the week of the 17th. So very exciting. I'm really glad to be bringing that facility back online, and we'll give the crews our blessings to have it be very smooth and seamless. If there's no questions, I'll move on to.
Thank you, Jared. Just a question on when can we expect the consultant presentation on the chamber of technology upgrades? You have any idea of the timeline on that?
Thank you, through the chair, Nick, Councillor Cashall, I don't have a response from them yet. They just received my request this morning for this presentation. So my expectation is that within the next week or two, we should be able to have something.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask you what happened with the pickleball carts?
That has not been included.
Okay,
We're still working through that.
okay, thank you.
What happened?
The
How do you damage those?
nets were taken down a little bit early.
Oh.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
So,
Like a major.
Yeah, you highlighted a very good point. There is a lack of communication and lack of protocol around some of our seasonal changes that have typically been done to meet resource requirements and maybe not necessarily communicated well enough to the community. So we're working on revising some of those protocols and how to been properly notify our beloved pickleballers of when they aren't able to use the facility.
And we're stolen by unicorn wearing costume people.
Only two.
That is fun,
Thank you.
fun deflated.
Ran into.
Okay, so for purchasing mechanical, our new big milestone for this period is our new, HT mechanic is in the process of being onboarded. Really appreciate having a full complement in our shop back there, especially at this time of year, prepping for our winter transition. Also, we have a full load of winter salt, sand and de-icer on site. So we are ready for that, for supporting our road crew. In terms of some operational updates, in the process of updating our mechanical shop hoist, there were some concerns raised earlier this year. We have an inspection coming here in the coming weeks. And a few key safety related repairs. We've been a little heavy on the training in the last little bit, trying to catch up in the fall, so we've completed quite a few equipment specific training activities, including bucket trucks and elevated platforms. We have coming up some fall protection, some skid steer training, and then also some supervisor safety certificate training for some of our supervisors to make sure we have a solid base for our incident response and some of the other issues that they face. In terms of projects, so I kind of mentioned the pipe racking project that should be completed here in the first week of November. The majority of the steel has already been erected. Now we're just kind of interconnecting and putting the roof on, and then we'll be able to store our pipe there. Feel free to pass the pictures around. The other project is the public works shop roof repair. So we went through our vendor Rimkus to have that tendered. The tendering closed last week of the week before. They're preparing their evaluation and recommendation. The good news is that the bids came in lower than we expected. I realize that's a bit of a different theme regarding this project, and it is very exciting to hopefully carry that through to execution. Looking ahead, we need to put some significant effort this fall into our updates on our CCB program. So much to Councillor Martin's behest, we're gonna be there.
Be the pest?
Squeaky wheel, you know? But we're looking to replace some existing equipment as well as making progress towards revising our approach there. And that's all from purchasing in Canada.
Councillor Cashel, go ahead.
I think I was just a little bit heavy.
Yeah, you were.
Just like the CTT CD. Who monitors that? How does that work exactly?
Thank you to the chair. It is currently not monitored. It is a recorded. So several of our cameras are recorded and we have access through, I believe it's security.
So I understand through the chair that there's a cost, maybe access that through Telford. Is that correct information or am I?
No, you're correct, Councillor Cashel. So if there's a request from the RCMP to see footage of a certain thing, we get charged sort of an hourly rate to have someone go in and clip that portion and go and look for it and then clip it and then provide it to the RCMP.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Benson?
You can answer my question. There, go ahead. I heard CCV. I have tech. I was like, we do that here too, but.
Yeah, thank you. If there's no other questions.
Yeah. It's like that here too.
Go ahead, Jared.
Moving on to Parks and Recreation. So in terms of accomplishments for this period, we've continued to be able to provide our 5 aquatic staff work ongoing during the shutdown, primarily through the arena. So thank you to those folks with some very positive, almost too positive to the point where folks are looking to poach individuals.
Oh, no.
But again, very good that we've been able to provide them with that. One more quick shout out to the individuals, not only to our Darren, our warehouse manager, who suggested the use of our free labor available labor, maybe is a better way of saying it, to distribute the flyers for this year's, fall cleanup. Due to the labor destruction with Canada Post, we were in a bit of a pickle there, and they were able to deliver those, door to door. So again, great initiative from those folks. Have some resource challenges at the Tuck Center during shutdown, but have had a lot of folks there step up, including the cashiers, to be able to fill in those blanks over the last little while. So shout out to the team for coming together and helping out. In terms of operational updates, focuses on kind of organizing the new schedule. With the program restarting on the 17th, there's a lot of new schedules to provide and ways of filling in all of our different aquafit or swimming lessons into the space that's left for this year. That also includes the training of our lifeguards and remaining staff as well, which will be just in advance of the reopening. In terms of community engagement and feedback, certainly we're seeing a little bit of anxiousness from some of our patrons regarding the reopening date, so glad to be able to make that announcement today. Certainly a lot more wanting to know when the facility would be and less perhaps frustration or irritation, so that was also nice. The community seems to really miss the pool and we'll be glad to have it back for them. So looking ahead, it's going to be a busy time for them, getting their staff trained, getting everybody back into what is normal operating condition for that facility and supporting a bit of a condensed program for the fall. Winter registration for programs is going to be happening on November 4th. So that is for the period of January to March for those programs. And again, looking forward to offering the facility for special events. That's everything for person.
Any questions? So I have a comment. Jared, you probably don't know me this well, but I am a keener for Aquafit.
I didn't know that either.
I am so excited that this is going to be happening.
My understanding is it restarts on the 18th.
Okay, I can't wait for that. I cannot, honestly, I understand what the community is going through. Missing that because I have really missed it myself, so I'm excited about this. Thank you. Councilor Bunsen.
You could consider doing that live on location.
Yeah.
When it opens.
Not at this time. Thank you, Jared.
Final update for me is from our grounds and roads department. So as we kind of heard before, key accomplishments for this period was the cleaning up of both the rotary gazebo and the lookout pier. Fall cleanup well underway, completing here end of next week, going very well. Winter preparation, which includes lane brushing, roadside vegetation brushing, and then park winterization is the other focus. So a lot of the parks have already received their final cuts, herbicide treatments, and the irrigation blowout have been ongoing. I think they're actually complete, if I recall. And then leaf control is starting, I think is probably the nice way of saying that. Operational updates, we're dealing with a few maintenance and equipment issues, some, dealing with some ongoing vandalism repairs. Doing some work on some of our covered staircases. And then also, sidewalk repairs is one of them focused over this last month. Training again, as we mentioned, some of the equipment specific training happened already. Fall protection coming up here on November 6th and 7th. And then all our crews went through the other training this week as well on the code of conduct, I believe this is referencing. So winter prep is going to continue to be the focus, continuing with the brushing, vegetation clearing. I know there is one bush on the corner of the highway and Highway Drive that I pleaded them, put a bounty on them to remove, and it is now gone. So I don't have to look at it every time I drive back to my home. So it'll be nice to have that cleared up in some of the other locations as well. And prepping salt and sand supplies was the other issue. So in terms of project updates, Bolesky Park, despite having less activity from the city is still ongoing. They're working on the backstop wall, the brickwork, I believe, is almost complete. They have some final touches to do there. The new sod is taking in well. It had its second and final cut for the season a week or so ago. McBride Street Playground is another project ongoing, and I believe that will be before council this afternoon for approval. We are still awaiting our report on our tree assessment. That should provide us a lot of information as to what we'll be doing in 2026. And any emergency or safety issues that we may need to address this fall. We are all doing some asphalt paving here in the fall. We have a few utility cuts that still need to be done, some patches, and then a couple of extra, larger sections as well. In terms of community engagement and feedback, and no direct feedback or inquiries this period. We are preparing a memo to the public in support of the upcoming brine applications. We'll be using brine to help our de-icing, and we want to make sure that the public understands what it is and why we're doing it and what the purpose is, so there's no confusion. Looking ahead, coming up soon is our annual Public Works Winter Snow Removal meeting. We'll make sure to highlight the forecast, safety equipment, snow removal procedures, and get the crew ready for the upcoming winter season. And that's everything for those events.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up we have Craig. Craig Sprouts. Thank you. For the utility.
Mayor, thanks for having me. I'll just begin with operational updates. I don't have too many huge projects this year, mostly planning, so might be a little dry. But we'll start with emergency repairs. We had a 2-inch service line fail on Highway Drive. We had an 8-inch water main break on Ostad Lane. Failed catch basin on Highway Drive kind of collapsed. Sanitary sewer service line behind Nelson Ave as well failed. That's all finished and completed. Preventive maintenance and inspections, the unidirectional flushing is complete except Shavers Bench. There's about 3 days left there. That's just due to competing projects. There's some contractors doing sewer work, we're staying out of there for now. So, fire hydrant maintenance, this time of year, we have a few old style fire hydrants left. They don't drain, so we have to pump them out every year so they don't freeze. It's one of the recurring, but we switch out a few every year as we go, so not too many left. Sewage lift station inspections and maintenance, we have 5 in total coming up this next week. That involves cleaning out the wet well, inspecting and looking for leaks, deficiencies, check valves, and the pump condition center. So 3-month storm and sewer flush list. This, you've heard this before. This is something we routinely do every 3 months. And we go through all the city's hot spots for any low grade sewer lines we flush them. Service requests, we've had multiple water service shut off requests, and with that, we have to locate them. Sometimes they're buried. Homeowners change their yard a little bit. Sometimes they get covered up. And sometimes they just don't work. So with every request, there's usually a repair. Infrastructure upgrades, we've been working on the stair lighting, upgrading brighter, whiter lights. So you can visually look across and see the difference. It's quite bright. We have about 20 streetlights left, of the old purple, the ones that have been failing. That's all warranty, other than labor. So we're close. Yeah.
So wait till after Halloween, they have a
Yeah.
ambiance.
So I had people tell me that they don't work so good. They thought we did it on purpose, but no, they're just failings. So at City Hall, we replaced the exterior lights up here. Usually that begins with one failing and breaking, and then we can't match them, so all of a sudden we do them all. So Skywalk Bridge lighting, we're gonna put lights under each end of the Skywalk Bridge just to help prevent some vandalism. I don't know, if involves to do that. Break it up a little bit, yeah. Just keep it a little bit cleaner. Columbia, we just today actually hot tapped a new 3/4 water service line. So that's exposed and put a new service line to a house in Columbia. So we're able, just with that, we're able to do a live connection, just with that technology. We replaced the 4-inch water main valve on Highway Drive as well. That was identified through our unidirectional flushing that it failed, so we're going along as we find these, we're replacing them. That was done recently. And as Jared mentioned, utilities pipe crack, one of the utility operators been working on it and a senior equipment operator, so we're doing a great job getting that up. Airport, next, well, actually this week, we are looking at installing a new sewer water connection to one of the hangars, so that's coming up shortly. And seasonal decorations, we're looking at hanging them up, I'm hoping a little bit earlier, just because they are seasonal, they're not specific. So we can enjoy them a little longer. And water treatment plants, we're doing a SCADA system upgrade. So the SCADA system controls water reservoir levels, the filter, bed, backwashes. It's the hub, it controls everything, so it's been failing incrementally slowly, so it's not supported anymore. Now we're due for an upgrade, that's gonna happen here early December. And capital projects, the water treatment plant transfer pumps and motor rebuild, that's scheduled for mid-November. And we got 2, so that's one of the 2, just for redundancy, we can only take one down at a time. East Trail storm improvements, we're in the process of procuring a cleaning and conditioning inspection, companies that specialize in it. We expect pricing by the end of October, so we should have to get started on that. And I'll have a better update next time we meet. Charles Lake Drive Twin Water Main geotechnical survey is complete. The grant application is submitted. We're working on the legal right of way. It's private land that goes, the road goes right through it, so we're working on that. However, the surveyor is not available till 2026, and the Ministry of Transportation is almost ready. So that's gonna be a little bit of a delay. Shavers Bench water main upgrades, we're just in the planning process. We'll have a good budget estimate for that work and the plan for next year. And hopefully we can take that on, so some good improvements. Seasonal prep for utilities is with that pipe wrapping. Stocking it, inventory in preparation, not only is it holiday season, it's also water main break season, so that's coming up, it goes hand in hand. So we just want to be prepared, check our inventory, make sure everything's good, we're in good shape. And that is all I have. So, perfect.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, through the chair. In regards to the airport, the sewer water connection to the hangar. Can you just explain a little bit about how that process works? Cause I understand we're all on subject out there, and so who pays for what, where are they tied into, do they have their own, just understanding. As in future, other individuals that have hangars may want to do the same, and what is our capacity for that?
Yeah, so this request came in from the airport manager, we met with the contractor that's running a section of doing some work to the hangar.
Okay.
There was a request in, put in, they would have to pay for this service connection, it's not us.
Okay.
It is on septic, but they're gonna run a grinder pump, basically. It's just a grinder pump, it'll mulch everything up, and we can pump it directly into the manhole, and then therefore gravity feed into the field. So, yeah. The water connection, there is water out there, we just have to do another hot tap and supply water. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No, okay, thank you. Claire.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks very much. So up next, we have the manager of engineering projects, Ben Jones. I don't.
Absolutely. I'll follow the same format here, starting with some key accomplishments. Probably comes as no surprise, 901 Helena is no longer there. Obviously, we were a little slower than we would like to have been, but in the end, we did it properly and it's still ground and we've got a new lot there for future development, which is great. The site has been perimeter with no post barriers as a temporary measure just to keep vehicular traffic off of it till we determine what we want to use that site for. Some operational updates in the field from engineering. The drone ortho imagery has been awarded. That's set to be completed this fall or early spring. It's weather dependent to get the best photography for our future mapping. We want to make sure there's as many leaves off the trees and no snow on the ground. So we got a couple of small windows on either side to work with. Some other capital project updates. Demolition is underway at 900 Spokane. If you were downtown on Saturday, you would have noticed the excavator on site for all the kids to watch started chewing into that building. It's a slow process as we dismantle that building, infill the basement and remediate and claim the wood that was in there that we want to save. So you'll see some equipment on site. Obviously, during this week, we're gonna have a bit of a lane closure on Spokane Street on that south, or I guess it'd be the southwest corner block. So that they can have a little bit more real estate to perform that work efficiently. The temporary transit exchange has been moved to the southeast corner of Cedar as well as the corner of Portland and Cedar to give them the ability to not change their schedule too much. We wanted to maintain sites along that block. It helps them and their schedules. Some of the stuff that Craig was talking about, just to talk to the collaboration between departments, engineering and utilities. So the 3-month list is a hotspot list for sewer issues throughout the city. Some of the capital work that was approved by council for the spot repairs is to help put in new trenchless sewer system lining next season. So the spot repairs that we're doing right now will facilitate that and some of the work in Shavers Bench. And as part of that work, we are upgrading manholes and sewer lines, but we're also improving storm systems if coming across some more upgrading water systems. So we did a few valve replacements within those work zones so that we don't have to go back and redo that asphalt in subsequent seasons. And we have 2 contracts going on at the same time. Bowser Street at the top of the Bowser Street Hill at Fifth Ave Hill is another job that we're doing where we're doing those same improvements. And as part of that, we did some storm at the same time because we're already there. We may as well get it done at the same time. As far as community engagement, when we do those water improvements in Shavers Bench, we currently have to shut off a huge area of notification of about 250 residents at a time. So again, utilizing hopefully some staff at the aquatic center, I'm gonna see it end of next week, we can have them deliver some of those notices and get those out in advance of that work next week. And then looking ahead for the engineering department, we will be tendering the Dunia project on Wednesday. That tender period will close at the end of November, looking to award that at the beginning of 2026. That's all I have. If there's any questions.
Any questions? How long do you think 900 Helena's gonna take?
Tentatively November 19th. That's where I'd like to see us. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's been a moving mark this whole time, but that's the date that if you want to write a date down, that I'm hoping for.
Councillor Wilson.
Chair, to you, with the old hospital building that's already down and flat, is there like a timeline when we could put that into parking? I think that was something we talked about, unless I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but it's just gonna. Am I getting ahead of myself?
No, but what we did figure is we're already doing the construction on the other part of the ball.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll get that down and then
We'll get it.
we'll get a plan going. Yes. That is the goal.
Get a lot of parking
Yes.
requests. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that.
And I can speak to the 900 lot that it was planned for spots, so I'm gonna be working with our parking attendant as far as how we can put that into use once that.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
Good.
Thank you.
That'll relieve some congestion downtown with parking for sure. Yeah. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you, Ben. And we will bring up the facilities maintenance manager. Brendan Oglo, welcome.
Your worship council, thank you for having me here today. We accomplished a few milestones since the last meeting, most notably the Kamiko refrigerated floor project became operational. Crews were able to actually get both the main and the kids rink operational on the same Friday on the 10th. With that, part of our boiler plant was brought online for domestic hot water reuse for flooding the ice, heating the building. Some operational updates. As Jared mentioned, parts for talc have been shipped out. I'm working to schedule crews in for the installation, testing, and commissioning of all the equipment to ensure that everything's fully operational ahead of time. In addition, we did take some of this additional downtime to get a number of key critical equipment installed that would have been installed next year due to long lead times. So we are able to check off some extra losses in that time frame and take advantage of everything. Over to the TMC. Upon startup of the curling rink, there's never broken links that were discovered. So crews have repaired everything, and some of them did happen overnight. Crews discovering them the next morning, so we were able to not lose any of the kids' ice and keep progress with the curling ice. All the curling slabs are down to temp and crews are ice making right now, and all 8 lanes will be operational. So I believe they're going to be utilized for the BC Winter Games. Started some staff training, so there's some annual refreshers, especially based around the ammonia plant for the Memorial Center. And so we're working on some annual refreshers and working on some updating of safe work procedures, especially with so much new equipment coming online. On to the capital side. We're aware the refrigerated floor project has come to completion. Everybody enjoying the new ice. Substantial completion has been signed off by the engineers and reward, and so the city has now taken full ownership of that project back. On the heat recovery project, we are moving on to stage 2 of that project. This involves the installation of our new boiler running by the network of hydronic piping up and over the building and onto the roof to be able to create that network for all of the new rooftop units. The boiler and hydronic work is on schedule, but unfortunately there is a slight delay from the manufacturer of the rooftop units. They're all being manufactured down in Texas, and we are starting to see some changes in procurement times. So we're going from what can be given as a certain lead time, and that seems to be changing on a week-to-week basis now, given that there is some cross-border ordering happening. This would push the units to be here. They do happen to be here into January, which is not really the ideal time to be redoing the roof and installing. So we decided so that would be pushed back till March to install those, as that way there's no reduction in snow on the rooftops. And because they are going to be opening up the roofs to cut new access holes, so we wanted to minimize any impact it had to the building. There's a bit still a construction zone active around the Memorial Center. So we're working with Midwest Mechanical to coordinate that to ensure public safety is still put in place. And with the hopes of going back to normal, eliminating the construction zone or minimizing it so people can then have normal access back to the kids' rink doors. Yeah, looking ahead, a few items planned. Rain to fall shutdown in parks right now. Winterizing facilities, ensuring a lot of our outdoor maintenance is complete. Continuing on with staff training and some changes in procedures, given so much new equipment that's going to be at the Memorial Center. And then working to bring talc back online as quickly as we can. That's my report. Does anybody have any questions?
Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So you mentioned that they're talking about, of course, while keeping safety in the back for parking, that they're working on minimizing the impact of that. Do you have a date that they have figured that we would be able to have more accessible parking back there? I wonder, I was there this weekend, there was a walkthrough with Winter Games, there is, where was what, 8, 9 hockey teams plus Smokies, plus there was a COVID clinic at the same time. So the parking is really paramount, that, we get some accessibility back there wherever we can. Even on weekends when there's 8 stalls that are just sitting there with nothing, if there's an opportunity to move temporary fencing, what does that timeline look like? Cause parking is a significant challenge at that arena, right?
Absolutely. Through the chair. Yeah, so we're looking at. There's a bit of overhead work that has to happen. The timeline we're looking at right now is by the end of the month. So that one we're hoping to have, so we're prioritizing overhead work, anything that's gonna have heavy equipment there. And then once that work's completed, we can change up, reduce the size of the construction area. Just because it's a bit difficult with. When we have a project of that size, we hand over a level of responsibility to the prime contractor, so they take on liability for that area. So it has to be done in coordination to ensure that there's not going to be liability or any dangers to the public if they are entering that construction zone. But yeah, at this point in time, we're looking at about for the end of November is kind of our plan.
Any other questions? For Brendan? No. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming today. Okay, so Lisa's not here for the recreation program coordinator report, so we'll just catch up with her next time around. And we will move on to our staff reports right now. We have. Thank you. 2 monthly reports. Here we have the building department for August 2025 and the building department for September 2025. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Benson. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to the 2025 third quarter financial reports. We'll start with the staff report for the third quarter. Colin, I don't know if there's anything that you want to report out on that.
Just a couple of things. One, I noted just even, I think council had a chance to review it and look at the numbers and read the verbiage. I think that, we're in a good spot. A couple of things that popped into my head just was one is I talked about general government, where we were expense wise compared to last year, but didn't talk about budget. That, could be an added budget, but part of that is, we have planned for the deputy CFO and the planner to have been here a number of months earlier than they ended up getting here. So that's one of those things that's giving us some expenses under budget. There's also some timing difference with IT and some of the higher level cost for software that we haven't got charged in this certain quarter. So that was again just something else that I wanted to talk about. Happy to take any questions that anybody from that council may have.
Councilor Benson.
Through the chair. I just have to find it. It talked about the stair assessment and that there was no bid, so we're going to go with WSP. Will that just be using like the budget that we had?
Yeah, and so great question. Timing of that, we're in conversations with them now, so my expectation is that we'll get an idea, figure what the dollar amount is, and look at that for 2026 budget. So if we come for council, yes, certainly hoping that the budget that we've allocated will be sufficient. But we'll have a better sense once we get a report from them on what they can do.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the City of Trail, the third quarter of 2025. I don't know if there's any comments on that.
Well, again, I said, that the other thing too, just also provided some of the overtime numbers, and I know hopefully that was satisfying to council just to sort of see the numbers, see the trend is we're in a lot better place than we were last year in the first number of months. Now, again, remembering that the RCMP's year end and reporting is different than cities, and so sometimes it's a bit confusing why we're talking about 6 months. It's like, well, that's April 1st until September 30th. So, I mean, good conversations with them, and I think working better at no surprises. I didn't like the surprise that we had last year as far as where we were going, where we were charging. So confident that that's in a better place, and that if we have any of these things coming up, then we'll be able to alert council.
I think it,
Are we speaking to the overtime now, is it sure?
Certainly.
On the overtime, right, gentlemen?
did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it just seemed like we jumped ahead from the,
Yeah,
but anyway, yeah, I'd just like to speak to it if it's possible, or we can wait till it comes up on the agenda.
Counselor Hanson, where did you want to speak? What are you speaking on?
Oh, just asking questions about the overtime, but we can wait till that part after the rest of the report is reviewed.
Okay, I think we're done with the City of Trail third quarter, right? 25.
So your timing's good.
Yeah. So go ahead, Counselor Cashall. You want to speak on the RCMP overtime numbers?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Mr. McClure, for tracking down the information. I understand it was some effort to get it from head office, E-Division head office. So just some simple math on this for anybody that might be listening. From April 2024 to March 2025 is the fiscal year, $611,486 for 6,098 hours. Simple math on that, it works out to be about $100 an hour is what we're paying for our overtime. And some of that would be travel time. And I know that one member.
And sorry, just again, that was one thing too, Counselor, this would just actually be wages. The other part that they explained maybe before, but maybe not in this report, was they group all of the travel time, per diems, all that underneath separately, and then it gets charged out on when they for those communities that are 5,000 over and that pay for their RCMP, it goes into a per officer charge. And so that's where, when they budgeted, I think it was like 234, we ended up at 242 sort of thing. So a combination of things, but that's where they end up charging those items. So
So I thought that only applied to the chair, I thought that only applied to expenses like meals and accommodations and that. I thought travel time was, but anyway. We've got $100 an hour that we're paying for our overtime. So it does come at a premium. I'm not gonna question the need for this overtime, as we cannot compromise on public safety, but it does come at a cost. And is in part the result of the RCMP's unsustainable, unlimited, full pay sick leave model, which was clearly criticized in a July 2025 report by the Management Advisory Board on Oversight, an oversight body that advises the RCMP. So I just wanted to point that out, that it is part of their current problem in not dealing with their sick leave, indefinite sick leave. And municipalities like Trail pay for it, at double the rate almost for getting members in here to protect our community. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. McClure. Thank you, Mayor Jones.
Counselor Hanson.
Thank you, through the chair. Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around OT hours, OT paid. So, significantly, hours are different. So, let's just take this year. April was 294 hours, OT paid 1608. And then OT hours in June were 108, but OT paid was 20,014. Can you just explain just the numbers there for me?
just that I tried to put the little asterisk
Sorry.
up there. And so the asterisk goes down and it says the OT is not usually paid out in the month that it's worked. And can take up to 6 weeks of OT paid out. And on top of that, that's if you've done, I guess you're filling out the paperwork correctly. So that's why.
So reflectively, that 20,000 could have been April's.
Could be
or
part of April's, could be
294.
part of May's, could be
Okay.
before.
No, that makes perfect, no. I was sitting there going,
Totally,
Why
yeah.
December's not timing. Thank you.
And then,
April 0.
yes.
Right.
Yeah. So hopefully that is explanatory there. Thank you for those questions. The other part too is that I think I had spoke to this group that I was unaware of the attempted murder, and I just was reminded that that was when the person was dropped off with the gunshot wound to the head. And the person's this recently they were noted they didn't show up for court, I think, and but that was the attempted murder. I was thinking about a different severe issue, but hadn't thought about that one, and that's, but anyway, that's one of those things. And for our RCP officer team here, they bring in specialists from like from the Kelowna area, so that's one of those charges that we get a pay for.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there any questions on those two documents? Okay, we'll move for the recommendation that the 2025 third quarter financial report for the 9 months ended September 30th, 2025 be received for information. Thank you. All those in favor? That was carried. Thank you. Appointment of the approving officer, and I will pass this on to Tracy.
Thank you, your worship, through to council. With Chris coming on board, we can now have an approving officer. That is part of his job description. I know Colin's very disappointed that he will no longer be the main approving officer. Chris was not with us last week because he was actually away at the NADI approving officer training. So he is fully ready for the job and capable of taking it on. So we're just looking to officially appoint him through council.
Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to the recommendation that council appoint Chris Bucknell. Manager of Planning and Climate Action as the city's approving officer under section 77 of the Land Title Act. And Colin McClure as the alternate approving officer. And further, that council authorize the manager of legislative services to advise the land title office of the change. All those in favor? That was carried, thank you. Is there any other reports? Anybody here for question period?
There's no one online.
Oh,
Your worship, Greg, sure.
a motion to rise from the committee of the whole, please. All those in favor, thank you. Resolution to exclude the public, recess the public meeting until 6 p.m. and immediately convene into the closed session. The resolution is that pursuant to section 90 of the community charter, the public will be excluded from this portion of the meeting as the subject matter being considered relates to the following. The community charter, section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. Community charter, section 91E, the acquisition, disposition or expropriation of land or improvements. Community charter, section 91L, discussions of municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures and progress reports for the purpose of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual municipal report. And further, that the public portion of the meeting be recessed until 6 o'clock p.m. And further, that council will immediately resolve into the closed portion of our meeting. Seconder, please. All those in favor? That was carried. Thank you.